All right, hello everybody. SIG architecture for October 17th. We have one agenda item around customize in kube control. So Machi, go ahead.
Yes, so basically, 6CLI has been struggling a little bit over the past years with Customize, the maintainers of Customize, because we've had a major turnaround in the past, I would say 2, 3 years, where people come and go. And generally there was a time there was a past time where Customize got stuck, and eventually we were able to untangle thanks to people that were working with Customize. And the addition of Customize several years back has been somewhat controversial. And we've been talking back and forth about the possibility of removing entirely Customize from kubectl, basically. We would like to steer people towards using the standalone, which on one hand, it has a lot more features, a lot of the features that exist, which are allowing specifically some kind of customizations, such as plugins and similar of how the customize is working. They are not available by default in kubectl, and we will likely not want to enable those because they potentially expose customize and kubectl to additional injection points that we haven't from the kubectl standpoint identified. And I've been talking with several of the 6CLI chairs, and the majority of us basically agrees that we would like to at least start the discussion around what it would take if we decide to deprecate and remove customize from kubectl. And based on from what I'm reading through the enhancement issue, the majority of the responses that I'm getting are what I also wrote down in the enhancement, that the risk of breaking users is probably the biggest hurdle at this point in time. Um, I've noticed while going through the comments that potentially we could maybe freeze customize at some point in time. Although I've noticed Jordan pointing out, rightfully so, that this would basically allow us to expose us to potential danger of not updating customize, which probably isn't what we would want to achieve. Mm. So I wanted to hear from what other people are thinking. Is there a path in the future where we could potentially drop customize from kubectl? Or at this point in time, this is rather not a thing that we should pursue? Or maybe there are options where we could uh, steer people away from using customize and rather encourage them to using standalones in one way or the other, or limit the through, for example, limiting the functionality, which is partially already happening. Any thoughts?
Um,
Anyone?
so can I ask a question? So one thing that's a little confusing.
Hmm.
Um, so I can understand. I mean, the idea of freezing it doesn't work because, right, you have the things Jordan raised on the issue, but like one of the motivations for removing it is that you were concerned about its maintenance, but if it's not being maintained, then like freezing it wouldn't be a problem. So there's a sort of contradiction here. If we have active maintainers, then shouldn't it be their responsibility? Like at some point, I guess Kube Control has to bring in the new dependency and upgrade it. But are there any is there any CI or anything such that as customizers being developed, they're making sure they're not breaking the integration? Like what is the relationship between? I mean, it customize is part of the Kubernetes umbrella, right? It's a SIG project. Like, what is the relationship between the two sub projects such that we're ensuring that even if we limit the surface area within cube control, like we're not breaking that surface area at all, and that we're why isn't it just upgraded with every single release as a matter of course? Are there CI issues or what?
So Customize is being upgraded at least once a release. I would say pretty consistently over the past several releases. Uh, the two people that volunteered currently after the drama that we were closer to the end of the last year where we were almost without a person maintaining it, that thankfully cleared out at this point in time. And we have two maintainers who are able to ensure that Customize is working and is being consistently upgraded in kubectl. Answering the second part of the questions with regards to integrations, that's the part which is a little bit less covered because there is no strict contract about the functionality of Customize that we expose in kubectl. It allows the basic functionality for sure. There are basic tests in integration in Kubernetes which verify the basic functionality of Customize that it is working. Um, but it is not extensive as Customize uh, tests that we already have in the Customize repository.
Okay. All right. I'll just think about it, Jordan. You're muted, Jordan.
Too many mute buttons. Uh, I'd commented a few times on the issue. Um, I'm having a hard time understanding the motivation, I guess. There were a few motivations mentioned. One was like it was sort of controversial to bring it in the first place, and we don't want to sort of be a kingmaker. But I feel like that ship has already sailed. Like I kind of felt similarly when it was brought in, but like it's in, and people like thousands of people rely on it, and it's advertised as stable, and it's in. Reopening that discussion doesn't seem helpful to me. Uh, the specific motivations about like maintenance difficulty and dependencies and confusion that the subset of customized that's in kube control is different than the full set. Um, Taking those sort of one at a time, the dependency issue has actually been improving. Uh, the last few updates were trivial, and actually the last couple I think dropped some of the more problematic dependencies like Starlark. So like that seems to be actually fine now and in a good trajectory. The part about confusion about the embedded version having a subset of the functionality, um, I guess I would point to all of the invocations of kube control that are successfully, happily using the embedded version and say like for those people it doesn't seem to matter that it's a subset. Like maybe they don't have plugins, maybe they don't have exec things or read from local file. Like I don't know what all the plugins do, but there's a lot of people very successfully using it. They don't seem to care that the full set of maybe more risky things that you could do with the standalone version aren't available in the embedded version. So finding a way to address any confusion that's there seems useful, but I don't think just removing the embedded version for all the people who are successfully using it, that response doesn't make sense to me.
Macho, what is the behavior if somebody tries to use, like, I assume that we limit the CLI flags to things. So if they try and use a CLI flag that's not supported, it probably just pukes on it. But if there's something in like the customization file or something, like what is the behavior of the embedded version versus, when some feature that it tries to use isn't there?
Uh, I believe it will either silently fail or ignore the functionality. I personally haven't tried because the experimental functionalities of Customize weren't something that I was involved in to have too closely. So I would have to double check how we are handling those cases. We could theoretically improve that bit most likely,
Like
and give users a little bit better information that, oh, if you want to have like, we have a limited subset and stick with that limited subset and
And
just inform
use the
users.
standalone. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Uh,
finding a way to be clearer. Like your customized file uses this thing. This isn't available in the embedded version. Here's where you can get the full version.
mhm.
Like that that sounds great to me. Like improving user experience, reducing confusion, directing them to where they can be successful for people who wouldn't be successful with the current embedded version. All of that sounds totally fine.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a reasonable approach as well, I guess.
David.
Yeah, I'm interested in what happens if we get back to a state where either Customize lacks a maintainer or Customize has made a change that makes it impractical to pull back into Cube Control. Don't know right now what that would be. But when that happens, we will be faced with a choice of, I think, broadly keep an old version of Customize forever, remove the functionality of Customize, or what?
I mean, that's a problem with every single dependency we have. Customize is even better than most because it's actually owned by us. So none of that really concerns me all that much.
I, I guess at that
Well,
point in time, we would basically freeze what we have and only deal with potential security uh, issues
so
with
if we're willing
updates.
to do that in general, like we're sitting here, we're saying, you know what? Yeah, we would freeze that, we'd fork it, and we would keep it up to date
And
for
if it lacks
some
a maintainer,
users.
we wouldn't even fork it. We would just like the project owns the repo. We would just say no more changes. We fix
Yeah,
security bugs.
it's
I don't
our
know.
it's our
It
project,
seems
right?
like
It's our
the
repo.
maintenance
Yeah,
contract of the customized repo should be it won't make changes that would make it impossible to update it in Kube Control. Like that's how the project started. That's the contract it has
So
to.
I'll say the project has gone broken at least twice. I was there when the project recyclically vendored the Cube API. Like that's not a distant memory. That is like we were there, and yeah, now we have this issue, and it was actually disputed what should happen. Uh, the
I don't remember any dispute. It was, I mean, maybe I believe you. I just like we should learn from those lessons and put guardrails in place to catch those from coming back in, just like we've put them in other places.
we could. Why would we discount the desire of SIG CLI to fork and freeze now? Because that's what's happened here, right? Like we've said in the end,
I
if we were
mean,
forced to, we would fork and freeze, or we would freeze. If
I,
SIG CLI wants to do this today, why are we telling them no?
If
I,
they have a
I'm
way,
not telling them no. I mean,
if
well,
they
go
have a
ahead.
way to continue addressing security issues on the embedded version, here's the branch. Here's the embedded Kube Control customized version branch. And if there's a security issue, that's the branch we'll fix the security issue in. So we can make Kube Control whole in an ongoing way. And customize master branch goes nuts. Like I wouldn't necessarily object to that.
Because
Yeah, I don't have an
that's what
objection to
I'm
that
looking
either.
at, right? Like I'm hearing that
Yeah,
there's a project around Customize. They want to move forward. There's a separate project on Cube Control, and they really don't want to. And if we can offer a way to say, hey, we'll give CVE service on this, and we'll keep this version in Cube Control. And if 6CLI wants to do that, that sounds like a very reasonable thing for us to do.
Yeah, sounds like extra maintenance burden to me, but that's up
I,
to them if that's what they
yeah,
want
like
to.
I don't want to get to that one where no, there's a maintenance burden either doing A or doing B, and I'm not in a position to tell them which maintenance burden is better.
Yeah, that's fair. Tim, I think you had a hand up for a while.
Yeah, I mean, we're hitting on the same points that I guess I wanted to make. I find it hard to say Customize would have no maintainer when it's part of kubectl. We're the maintainers, whether we like it or not. Right? Sorry, Mache. So like, could we sort of running with what was just said about eagerly forking now? Why don't we flip it on its head and say the one true Customize is the one that's built into kubectl, and that's it. And the standalone Customize becomes a wrapper for kubectl Customize. And yes, we have a maintenance burden, but at least we acknowledge that it's a maintenance burden and not a dependency burden. And then vendoring things like the API goes away because that's all much more closely in the family now. Or is there, maybe I'm not privy to, some big plan around Customize to make radical changes in it?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time getting a read on the desire. On the one hand, it sounds like we barely have anyone, or we can't rely on like continued maintenance of Customize. And so that leads to one path, like, okay, freeze it, security fixes only from this point on. Where does the code live? Maybe a separate repo, maybe we bring it back into like kubectl repo. I don't know, whatever's easier. Like at that point, you're looking to like minimize maintenance costs. That's one thing I've heard. The other thing I've heard is like, oh, we want to go make big changes in a different direction that would preclude, that would make it impossible to bring it into kubectl. And I have a hard time seeing how both of those things can be true. Like, there's nobody to maintain it, but also we want to make big changes.
They can both be true because it's different Wii's. There's one group of people who now own Customize and have made changes that apparently aren't compatible with kubectl. That's already happened. It's in the past. And there is a separate set of Wii's that is trying to keep kubectl working consistently. So I can definitely see how they can both be true at the same time. I'm not personally involved, but that doesn't sound self-contradictory to me.
Customize was started with the intention of embedding it into kubectl. And so if like taking that project in a direction that makes embedding it into kubectl impossible, seems like that's not Customize, that's a Customize plus non-embedded. Like that's a different thing. Seems like
here, I guess I'm not sure if everyone's like the same standpoint here, but I had to do my own research, so I just figure out, I guess I'll be the dumb one and have to restate what I had to learn. Was like the way I see this, kubectl and Customize are both sub projects of the SIG CLI community. Both projects are owned by Kubernetes. To my knowledge, nothing has changed about that. And so it seems like when we talk about us and them or we's or that type of thing here, I get a little confused because it's like the SIG, to my knowledge, is owning both those tools. So I don't know if there's like an implication here that says we no longer want Customize to be a Kubernetes subproject, or if the maintainers of Customize are asking to leave the SIG and go on their own. Like, it's hard to actually figure out like the level of conflict or non-conflict that there is. And then just looking at the issue, it looked like the maintainer of Customize didn't seem to think there was a conflict. So then I'm just kind of confused on that, but clarifying to myself that yes, Customize is actually sponsored by SIG CLI. It's not even like it's a SIG apps project. It's the same SIG. I think is helpful to make sure we all are on the same page on, like, maybe I'm the only one that sometimes gets lost on that, but otherwise,
No,
I think
that's part of the, yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's part of the confusion here is that it's not clear why there's an issue. I mean,
there is no, thankfully, there is no opposition in either direction. It's more about the struggles that we as the leads had to go through to ensure that there is a continuity in maintenance of the Customize. And like I mentioned, towards the end of last year, there was a risk where we will not have anyone picking up Customize and that was a real danger for a couple of months because the current maintainer was leaving and we didn't have anyone lined up. Thankfully, all the cards played well enough that the previous maintainer was able to work a little bit longer, long enough to raise additional people and find those people who are interested in. So that's why the current situation is somewhat stable. Definitely from the discussion that I've had with Hugo and Varsha, one thing that stands definitely is that the development of customized is somewhat stalled compared to what it has been about 2 or 3 years ago. There was a very active development happening 2 or 3 years ago, with the addition of several features which are currently in alpha, a lot of them, which probably I have to discuss again and figure out what we want to do with those open enhancements which never got the chance to move forward. And I know that there's been a couple of people who were interested in pushing them forward, but like I said, those were only singular instances where people were interested in having those additional functionality.
Macho, just to clarify then, like, I think all of us here represent other SIGs also can empathize with the situation that sometimes a SIG accepts a sub-project that then doesn't necessarily get the ongoing support or has some turnover that makes interest vary elsewhere. And so I think the situation you're raising there seems very empathetic to the degree of like, hey, you know, it's hard to carry a thing forward if you were in a present predicament. What I can't tell is like, is the situation better or worse now? Like I feel like having this discussion, if it was like the Sega wants to deprecate customize entirely or was making a more assertive declaration, it would be easier to myself like work through how to reason through this versus like the two projects will still stand in isolation from the same group. Like that's the part that I struggle a little bit. Like, so just to get clarity, like there's no desire for the SIG to not continue to sponsor or support customize, or is there a desire for that?
No, the separation is only purely on let the maintainers of customize move it in their own direction, whatever that will be, and not specifically tie it with kubectl. So there's
That
no
makes a lot of sense to me, right? Like I could, as someone is, if someone comes and they don't care what the history was, they don't care how customized started 6 years ago. What they care about is it's a really useful way to manipulate files on disk, and they want to go in a direction that isn't necessarily compatible with cube control. And to free that and allow that to happen, we can think of different ways to manage it. And one of the ones that I think Mache came here with was, what if we freeze the level? And finding a way to help him do that seems reasonable. You could tell someone to fork, but there's no need to.
So, yeah, I think that first principle, we don't want to break users, right? So in that sense, I don't think it makes sense to remove it from cube control. If we say freeze it at a V1 or whatever it is today, and whether that's a fork or a branch or we vendor in whatever we do mechanically, as long as the SIG is going to maintain the security patches of it, then customize can go on forevermore, and you can grow up and say, oh, we support V1 of customize, and anything else is V2, and makes a clear distinction in users' minds, right? If you use a version as opposed to just some point in time, and that seems reasonable to me. But I think the first principle has to be don't break the users.
I also suspect that the embedded version of kube control gets significant use, and so freezing and writing off all of the users of the embedded version and saying we want to go do really different things, I suspect that that would increase confusion and dissatisfaction in customized users. But I don't have enough data to know that, but that's my intuition. Yeah, keeping a V1 branch that we can apply security fixes to if needed, and having a V2 branch that just as a stated policy says like we don't care about bringing V2 into kube control anymore, so we're gonna vendor a bunch of APIs and do stuff we know will not let us bring it into kube control. Customize, that's terrible. Like I wouldn't do that if I were maintaining it. I think that'd be more work and more confusing, but you know, that's the call of the SIG CLI leads and the people who are actually on the ground doing the maintenance. I don't think as a project we would say, no, you can't do that, but trade-offs there.
Okay, I guess I got my answer, and I think we can work it out from here.
Awesome. Then I think we're done for today. So everybody gets half an hour back. Thank you all. Bye-bye.